In this video, we're talking about why you should use ethanol and what you need to know at the pump. You're working with the state of Nebraska on E30. Tell us a little bit about that whole program.
Yeah, it's a really, really cool project that started in small scale in 2019, but we've been able to really bring it to the full fleet. And what we're actually doing with our state vehicles is putting in a mid-level blend, 30% ethanol, 70% gasoline, testing it in non-flex fuel vehicles, and watching the engine performance. So it's a really, really widespread demonstration showing the way that we can save money through the use of ethanol fuels. We can continue to take advantage of higher octane fuels using more ethanol in that blend. And then at the end of the day, also reduce emissions within our state fleet. So it's realistically just trying to use as much infrastructure as we can to do as much as we can with our agricultural products.
And as part of that, you've got a number of vehicles involved in this. And how many check engine lights have you had during this whole trial?
You went right for my favorite statistic. We have 0 check engine lights so far. No issues with diagnostic trouble codes or anything like that. The vehicles seem to really love the fuel. It's a high octane blend. If you're thinking about it in terms of the pump, it's like pushing a button with 93 on it. You know, those vehicles operate extremely well on that sort of blend. It's almost like racing fuel for your regular car.
Reed, I think it's interesting you call it a mid-level blend. That sounds like a high blend. Do we need a special vehicle to get there? How high can I go in it in just a regular car?
In a common vehicle, of course, if you're 2001 and newer, you can choose E15, and any vehicle on the road today is approved for E10. So definitely go and get yourself some ethanol. It's going to save you an average of 60 cents plus per gallon when you're within this state. But when we talk about mid-level blends, we talk about between E85, those flex fuels, and above E15. So we're kind of in a different territory here, examining different levels of octane, taking a look at how the engine does.
So what are some statistics out there that kind of really demonstrate specifically how E30 is done?
Yeah, and I think just looking at our demonstration statistics is really, really solid to be able to look at the savings that we can get. The state has been able to save itself over $150,000 just very simply by choosing an ethanol blended fuel that's 30% instead of 15%. And then even when you go a little further, if we replace 10% of the Nebraska state fleet, you know, with our E30 vehicles, we're saving on the order of thousands, tens of thousands of tons of CO2 per year. And even beyond that, what's really exciting is when you kind of apply this to all of the legacy fleet. We have 281 million internal combustion engines on the road today using gasoline. If they could all switch over to E30, not only would that drive more demand for our corn producers, but that would also significantly save millions of dollars per year for families across the country.
You know, one thing I can speak to that is the first time I heard then Governor Ricketts talk about E30, I immediately started putting E30 in my truck, and now I've just bought a new one, but both times I've started with E30 in the whole thing. So I've had over 60,000 miles in my vehicles since then, and not one issue. And I think the mileage is actually a little better, but that's anecdotal.
And you might call it anecdotal, but you're really hitting that sweet spot. And that's why we've targeted E30 in the first place, is being able to look at truly what is the best payback that we can have in terms of octane and power and efficiency in your engine when it's not a flex fuel engine. So E30 is that perfect range.
I think it's interesting that you hit on the carbon reduction of driving, using ethanol. It seems like everything I hear about when we want to reduce carbon, we have to use electric vehicles, and there's the hybrids and everything, but I don't think ethanol gets enough credit for that. We are reducing carbon compared to other fuel alternatives, right?
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's been some recent testing done on even E15 versus E10, and a simple addition of an extra 5% of ethanol there is able to reduce carbon monoxide emissions by 17%, particulate matter by 18%, and NOx by even up to 5%. So those are really important emissions reductions that we can use today in those vehicles that are on the road right now. The over 250 million internal combustion engines today.
So you get to the pump, there's a lot of different things up there, and sometimes it's really confusing as to what everything is and what's all this mean. So when you go to the pump, explain that to us, what everything means and how that affects me.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to remember that every vehicle on the road today that uses gasoline is approved to use a 10% ethanol blend for sure, bar none. That's been the case since well before the 90s. So all of our vehicles are suited for that. In terms of E15, it'll be called a few things. You'll go to the pump, you might hear a couple naming conventions like unleaded 88 or UNL 88, things like that, that you will see. But one tell for E15 is to be able to look at the octane, because when you're going to choose a higher ethanol blend, you're going to get more power out of that fuel through that, basically ethanol's natural octane state. So when we call it unleaded 88, you're able to actually achieve a higher performance from your vehicle by, being able to push that button. Instead of 87, you're getting a little more for yourself. And not only that, another tell for ethanol blended fuels is to look at the lower price. So when you're up there, you can actually take and often see that unleaded 88 or E15, a 15% ethanol blend, is coming down in price on average in Nebraska about 10 cents, and it oftentimes well beyond that, especially at times when oil and gas pricing are very high. So those are a couple tells that you can have. And oftentimes, one more note for the audience is that E15 is often in blue hardware. So when you're at the pump, if you look at those blue kind of handles or hoses, you should be able to purchase that as long as your vehicle is 2001 and newer.
So Reed, I want to jump in. The biggest question I always get is, yeah, it may be cheaper, but how much gas mileage am I going to lose? What have you seen there with your state fleet and just E15 in general?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brent. And we harp on it all the time, but with modern engines being able to take advantage of that octane and be able to get more power and more performance out of that same fuel, your mileage decrease is almost negligible at this point. Your vehicles are well attuned to be able to adjust for that extra oxygen content, and realistically, you may only lose well less than 1%. And oftentimes, as you mentioned, you do better because of the higher performance of the fuel.
So what does octane really mean? You see a number and it goes up. What's that mean to me as somebody driving a vehicle?
So what octane means is that your engine is going to knock less when you're driving on that fuel. It's going to be running smoother within the engine, and you're going to get essentially more power and efficiency out of that fuel when you're driving it every day. And so as long as you're driving a modern vehicle that's able to understand the kind of differences in those fuels, you should be able to take full advantage of that as a consumer.
You can download our app now. The link is below, and be sure to follow us on our socials.